So, I started drinking and using probably at like 13, 14, but it was fun, for me at first. It was, I enjoyed, getting blackout drunk. There was no real consequences for me.
Oh yeah, my journey with addiction started when I was like 11, 12 years old. My mom like introduced me to weed. My mom is getting me high, so I'm like, oh, this is okay, right? Like it's okay for me to get high.
My father passed away when I was 12 years old, and I think that was the beginning of the spiritual malady. I started to experiment with marijuana early on. At the same time, I also played baseball, high school baseball, and once that started to kind of slip away, I intensified my drug use.
I would just isolate a lot in my head because I didn't know how to act like everyone else did. So I just would isolate within music in my head. And so when alcohol was introduced, I was able to have a conversation and socialize and not think that I wasn't a part of, not feel the loneliness or the emptiness inside of me.
That feeling, that emptiness, that hole inside of me just was always with me. And I think, drugs and alcohol filled that hole to some extent.
And in the back of my head, I always thought that like drugs and alcohol were the problem, and come to find out I was my own problem. And the spiritual malady that I suffered from since an early age was catching up to me.
My father was abusive. I was involved in like a bunch of gangs and gang violence. Like I didn't know who I was. Like I was afraid. I didn't know who I needed to fit in with. So it was all that stuff that I did, all the things that I did to people in the past, all the shady acts that I took when I was hanging around with shady people, and I just couldn't shut it up. I just couldn't shut these voices up in my head. And the only thing that could make those voices go away were the drugs and the alcohol. So I fully engaged in that lifestyle because I didn't hear anything. I didn't hear those insecurities anymore. They all went away, they vanished, right?
And I would physically get sober, but then I would relapse a year later or relapse a few months later. And, I had my first child when I was 25, and I remember looking at that little girl, her name's Indiana. I remember saying, this child is never gonna see me drink or use. And I was like certain of it, that child was never gonna see me drink or use. She had a stroke and she was life-flighted from one hospital to the next hospital. And emotions come up, and that's my solution. My solution that's the only coping mechanism I know is drugs and alcohol. And so, I used. When she was in the NICU, I used, and I stole her mother's prescription painkillers, and that was just my coping mechanism.
I never had a sustainable job. I worked here and there. I didn't go to school. I just didn't know how to live my life. And then up until I was 28, living back at my mom's house, stealing money from my sisters, my younger sisters, twins. They were 16 at the time, stealing alcohol.
And so it all kind of culminated for me. I got a divorce. I lost a job, lost a home. Here I am with a master's degree and a law degree and an undergraduate degree and a college athlete, and I can't stop using drugs or alcohol, and my whole life is torn to shreds.
I got pancreatitis. I drank so much that my pancreas was gonna burst. So I was in the hospital, so I had to sneak alcohol now. I was drinking mouthwash, I was smoking meth, but acting as if nothing was happening.
I was dope sick is what they call it. I needed drugs to not be sick. And so I broke into my parents' house with 2 gang members. I kicked in their door when they were out of town, and I ransacked their house. And I stole everything they had. And they had a camera, and they caught me because I broke into their house before. And they called me up, and it was one of the first times I've ever heard my dad cry. And he's like, I don't know what to do with you, but you're either gonna go to treatment or you're gonna go to jail.
And what made me realize that I don't want to use drugs and alcohol anymore was my attempt at suicide. I tried back to back one day, and then the next day later I tried to kill myself again, and it didn't work. And I was just more depressed. My family hadn't spoken to me in like 6 months. Birthday passed up, holidays passed up, no one was talking to me. I was alone. I had no friends. I had a full phone of contacts, and I couldn't hit any of those people up in my contacts because I had pushed everyone so far away from me that I had no one else to rely on anymore.
Then ultimately, I just tried to commit suicide. My sisters found me unconscious in the garage, hanging in the garage. So they found me there, and I got into a 5150 psych hold. And I got released the next day, and I called the Beacon House, first place I called.
I exited LA County's beautiful jail system. And I remember being homeless on Thanksgiving and my mom meeting me at the front door with a plate of food, and I wasn't able to come in for the first time with a family dinner. Holiday, I wasn't allowed to interact with family members. My little brothers were scared of me, and I proceeded to enter the household, and my mom ended up calling the cops on me, and I called the Beacon House shortly after, and they welcomed me with open arms.
I called my friend. I hadn't talked to him in a decade, because in addiction you burn every bridge. I hadn't talked to him in a decade, and he was a social worker. And he came in the middle of a snowstorm, and he took me to the emergency room. That's where my journey started, was at a psych ward at University of Utah Neuropsychiatric Institute, and I detoxed there for about a week. And then I said goodbye to my kids, didn't know if I was going to see them again, and got on a plane with my brother, and they flew me out to San Pedro.
Well, when I arrived at the Beacon House, I just wanted to go back to my family's house, because my dad had told me that if I graduate this program, he can take me back home. So I went there with the mentality of a child, still wanting to take from his family. But then also I went there with an immense amount of fear of dying, because I knew if I continued to get high, I was going to die. I was going to fully commit to my death, So it was like my fear, and then it was like my dishonesty that led me to start to take the program seriously. There was just something there, like it was genuine, it was real, and like the people were being honest with me. The guys there were telling me these stories that I could relate to, and I thought I was the only one with this kind of past trauma, So over time, it just like changed from dishonesty and fear to something that I really wanted. I wanted to achieve long-term sobriety.
My attitude when I first got to Beacon House was, I'm still gonna smoke a little bit of pot, and I'm gonna drink some Budweiser. And culturally, that was just like what I grew up with, and that was acceptable. And I remember I was going through it tough, like the first week, and I expressed that. An older, sober living guy came up to me, "Hey Zach, how are you doing?" I said, "Miserable, like life sucks, what's up?" And he said, "Well, have you tried to help anyone?" And I was like, "What are you talking about? I'm 3 days into treatment, how am I supposed to help anyone?" Like I was so self-absorbed that the concept of helping others was just not in my vocabulary or my awareness, So the attitude of ignorance, the attitude of, I had self-pity issues. When I first got to Beacon House, they called me depression mode. They called me dark cloud, Eeyore, right? Like I just was hopeless. I could not imagine life without drugs and alcohol, and not like some form of a drug or alcohol to fill me up, to make me smile, right? I remember after the first few days, my smile muscles hurt, like my actual jaw muscles, because I had not smiled in years like I was after the first week,
I think the biggest thing that still registers to me, that helps me a lot to this day, is that it's just not about me. Like it's not this life, and like the world is not about me. It doesn't center around me. I've been by grace lifted from the scraps. I didn't want to live. I've been revived, I've been redeemed, so I need to go out and help other people, that's my purpose in life.
I think all the previous efforts is that I'd hit a rock bottom for one. That pain, everything, I had to hit a rock bottom for me to even be willing to like look at another solution, let alone a solution that's 12-step based, or where there's a higher power, or there's a sponsor take directions from another man. So I had to be just beat up and not want to live, be spiritually, mentally, financially bankrupt for me. So that helped a lot. But there was something at the Beacon House. So not only did I have to be beat up, but I had to realize that there was a solution. And that solution came in the form of 100 guys. And I would see them like smiling and like having these great relationships, and that gave me just a little bit of hope, Like, okay, and I was hearing other guys talk about how they had their kids back in their life, and I was like, well, maybe this will work for me.
My relationship with my family now is amazing. I'm the rock that holds the family together. My brother had just went missing a few days ago, and my family called me to rely on me to put them at ease. So that's such a far cry from them not talking to me to now coming to rely and trust me today. And they believe that because I've shown them that this program works, that it can work for anyone.
For the longest time, up to entering recovery, entering Beacon House, our relationship dynamic was mother trying to save son, stepfather trying to prevent any more harm caused towards wife, my mom, and trying to help his stepson. And today it's more so a man and woman relationship, a man-to-man relationship. I'm able to give back. I'm able to help out when needed. Growing up, I never felt comfortable talking to my parents freely. And today, we talk about everything, and it's so cool because I've always wanted this for us, but again, I was such like a selfish and self-centered person that I just made everything about me. Any situation I was in, any conversation I was in, I didn't have like the ability to be other-centered. And I think if anything, the most important thing that Beacon House gave me was the ability to be other-centered, and that allowed me access to have a relationship with God today.
My family, like, we have a great relationship now. Healthy boundaries, but it's all my family and my dad, siblings. It's a good relationship. I hurt my sisters a lot, like the twins. There's like a 12-year difference there. I have 4 younger sisters, and my mom was divorced and just going through it. I know, and to see a child hurt like that, she didn't know what to do. And when I called my mom to make an amends, I've never heard my mom cry that way. It was a great cry. And then when I saw her, to meet her in person, she hugged me. She hugged me, and she said my heart was beating differently.
I think the one thing that I learned from the Beacon House is that life is not about me. It's about being service to others. It's about helping someone else. I always had that void that I talked about, looking to fill it with, money, scholastics, women, whatever it was. Looking to fill this hole that just couldn't be filled. But when I help someone else, when I'm of service to another human being, and I try to give them what was so freely given to me, that hole shrinks, and I feel fulfilled, and I have meaning and purpose.